and welcome back to my YouTube channel. This month I've been talking about mermaids in anticipation of the Disney live-action Little Mermaid, and in this video I'm actually going to do something a little bit different. We're going to talk about aquatic horses. There are actually a lot of fantastical horses and horse-like creatures and part horse creatures in folklore. Now, some of those are land-dwelling, like, for instance, unicorns, or the ones that fly, like Pegasus, but some of them are aquatic and live in the water. And so I wanted to talk about that in this video. I wanted to start off with the hippocampus, which comes from ancient Greece. This is a horse mermaid, essentially. It's the closest thing you'll find in, like, mythology or whatever to a seahorse. Like, a literal seahorse. It lives in the ocean, and instead of the horse's hind legs, it has a fish tail. And it's actually often depicted as looking very similar to the actual animal called a seahorse. For instance, here's a picture of the hippocampus, and here's a seahorse. Do you see the similarity? Now, I mentioned my preparations for this video to a family member who's not really into, like, mythology or folklore or whatever, and she thought that the hippocampus sounded really, really weird. And it does sound weird. It totally does. But it's not the weirdest horse that I found when I was doing research for this video. That would be definitely, in my opinion, the ichthyocentaur. The ichthyocentaur is also from Greek mythology, but instead of being the front half of a horse and the tail of a fish, it's a centaur, so human from the waist up, with the front legs of a horse and part of the horse's body, but then a fishtail in place of the back half. So it's like if you took a hippocampus and a centaur and decided to merge them into one creature. A lot of creatures from Greek mythology are kind of mix and match, and you have little bits of one animal or another, but the ones that are like several things together instead of just two, those are the ones that I think are just the strangest. Like the chimera, for instance, that also pieces together multiple things that don't belong together remotely. Like, I don't find centaurs or mermaids to be that weird, but maybe that's just because they're typically used in fantasy and stuff that's based on mythology, whereas some of this other stuff is a little bit more obscure. In any case, adding an additional part to the centaur, or to the hippocampus, whichever way you want to think about it, just makes it so weird to look at, and I don't even know what to say about the ichthyocentaurs other than, what on earth? Greek mythology is one of the main sources of mythical creatures that still feature prominently in a lot of fantasy novels today, but it's certainly not the only source. And another aquatic horse that's very different from the ichthyocentaur or the hippocampus is the kelpie from Scottish folklore. The kelpie is a little bit more of a dangerous creature than the ones from Greek mythology. I don't know of any stories about the hippocampus trying to drown people, but the kelpie definitely does. The whole point of it is that it's a shapeshifter. It can take on the form of either a person or a horse, and it'll try to drag people into the water and drown them. That's kind of its thing. As far as being shapeshifters and whatnot, the horse form is usually seen as the true form of the kelpie, and when it takes on a human form, there are signs that it's not really human, one of which sometimes is that it still has hooves. The kelpie is specifically from Scotland, but there are other similar creatures in the folklore of other cultures, particularly Scandinavian folklore. It goes by a couple of different names there, and I'm not quite sure how to pronounce them, but in any case, the idea of a horse that lives in lakes or rivers and that either tries to get people to ride it and then they get stuck to it and it pulls them under, or just drags people down under the water and drowns them. That's something that's very common in Northern European folklore. I kind of wonder why the idea of horses living in a habitat that's not usually lived in by horses is such a common thing. Because like I said, I mean, real horses don't live in the ocean or in lakes and rivers, but then I suppose real horses don't have wings and fly or have horns and magic powers either, so, you know, folklore imagines a lot of things to do with horses that really don't have anything to do with horses. As far as the aquatic horse stories, and particularly the ones like the kelpie that will try to drown people, those definitely seem like another permutation of the same trend of malicious water spirits just in general, because those are very, very common. I mean, going all the way back to the sirens from Greek mythology, which were not mermaids, but they were associated with the water, and they were associated with drowning sailors, so even though they were birds, still there's that connection there. I think that because water is something that is so essential to human society and human survival, but also something that's incredibly dangerous to us, both with drowning and with being lost at sea and just various things like that, that make large bodies of water a hazard. And then also the fact that if you look at it, you can really only see the surface. You can't see what's underneath. Even in, for instance, a large and deep lake or river, you don't really know what's down there. And so the idea that there might be something fantastical and maybe dangerous down there, it seems natural that that would be an easy idea to buy into on a societal level, to the point where you get all of these stories about malicious water spirits, because, I mean, it is dangerous, regardless of whether you think there's a kelpie down there that's going to try and drown you, or sirens that are going to try and lure you off your course, or whatever. Large bodies of water are both dangerous to humans and essential to us. Anyway, I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you liked it and you want to see more from me, be sure to subscribe. I post new videos on Mondays and Thursdays.